We're not about to put you on top of a 300-foot rocket and fire you at the moon. We're just thinking about it.
I'm ready, Mr. President.
I'm ready, Mr. President.
So am I, sir.
With more guys like these, how could we fail? Better get recruiting, Bob.
My God, these guys really are thinking of sending us to the moon.
If it weren't for the Russians, we wouldn't be going anywhere.
I know that at this moment, the Russians are far, far ahead and have massive rockets compared to us. And they have won the orbital race. But have they considered the moon? I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth. No single space project in this period will be more impressive or more important to mankind's ambition for long-range exploration of space, and none will be so difficult or expensive to accomplish. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade, not because it is easy, but because it is hard.
Okay, guys, listen up. As you know, my name is DEKE Slayton. Like Gus and Alan here, I was one of the original 7 astronauts.
Yes, sir. Okay.
But was grounded due to a heart fibrillation. To add to my punishment, I have been elevated to the position of head of the astronaut corps.
Which means he's the most bitter and twisted boss on the planet.
Like the first 2 groups of astronauts, most of you have a test fighter pilot background or have flown in combat in Korea. And like the second group, many of you bring at least a degree in aeronautics or engineering. As most of you are aware, the Apollo program's aim is to realize our late president's ambition of landing one of us on the moon before the decade is out.
And most importantly, before the Russians?
Yes, sir. Now, at the time, we thought he was nuts.
But after a year-long debate, NASA went for the Lunar Orbit Rendezvous, or LOR option, as the only way of landing within the decade. This option uses 2 spacecraft. One to land us on the moon, the lunar module, and one to take us there and back, the command module. The theory is to slingshot the 2 spacecraft like so, using the Earth's gravitational pull to get us there. Once we are in lunar orbit, the landing craft will separate and go down to the surface. After a brief stroll on the surface, the crew will fly the landing craft back into lunar orbit and redock with the command craft. Then, using the moon's gravitational pull, we'll slingshot the command craft back home.
However, all we've achieved so far is a few laps around the globe in suborbit.
Kind of like running up and down the garden path when your aim is a return trip to China.
Hence the Gemini program. Good morning, Neil.
Oh, good morning, Deke.
Guys, this is Neil Armstrong, one of the second group of astronauts whose special responsibility is flight simulation. To his left is a simulator of a Gemini spacecraft. This 2-man craft will test everything we can, step by step, over the next 10 missions in preparation for the Apollo program. Any questions so far? Buzz?
Will the Gemini missions attempt rendezvous and docking?
Yes, some of the Gemini missions will chase down a satellite and attempt to dock with it. Mike?
Will any of the Gemini missions attempt spacewalk? Oh! Damn, I mean extravehicular activity. EVA. Sorry, I'll keep working on my NASA-E's.
Yeah, thanks to the Russians kicking our asses once again. Congress is leading on NASA to include more EVAs as soon as possible. Any more? Okay, before we take a look at the Gemini simulator with Neil, I'll hand you over to Al here to discuss your individual specialties.
Thanks, Deke. Okay, guys, now the space program is expanding so fast that no one astronaut can keep up with all the changes. So like the 2 previous groups, we have carved up the technological pie and given each of you lucky guys a slice. I've taken on board your requests and tried to match your abilities to your specialties. First up, BUZZ Aldrin, mission planning.
Mission planning?
Yeah, this will involve establishing how many Apollo flights it will take to get us to the moon. And how we rendezvous 2 crafts in lunar orbit is by far our biggest unknown. As the only guy in the room with a PhD in rendezvousing, I thought this would play to your strengths.
Thank you, sir.
Gene Cerman, spacecraft propulsion and the Jeaner satellite.
Thanks.
Mike Collins, pressure suits and EVAs.
Suits? Whoa, more than one.
Yeah, 2 suits for the 2 very different types of walks. The Gemini spacewalks and the Apollo moonwalks. But hey, why did you apply for that one?
Oh, a combination of masochism and a fear of dealing with mathematical creatures like vectors and tensors.
Well, best of luck with that. Jim Lovell, communications.
Yes, sir.
Finally, Dave Scott, serious stuff this one. Guidance and navigation.
Yes, sir.
Okay, questions? Buzz.
In creating mission plans, am I to assume that every flick of every switch is to be included for both spacecraft and mission control?
Absolutely everything has to be in the plan and rehearsed in the simulator within an inch of its life. Not to be got right, but never to be got wrong.
So, unlike flying a plane, if we want to change course, we use Jim's tracking network to send up a state vector to Dave's computer, which sends a pointing command to Tom's instrument panel, which sends a command to Gene's engine to move our craft into a position called for by BUZZ Aldrin's flight plan.
Correct.
Now you can see why I pick suits.
Okay, guys, any other questions?
Yeah.
Dave.
What is the selection criteria for crew?
I select the crew. So as of today, I can confirm that having had 2 very successful unmanned Gemini flights, Gemini 3 will be commanded by Gus Grissom, pilot John Young, with Shearer and Stafford as backup. Gentlemen, let's catch those Russians!
Yes, sir.
How do I sway the decision? How do I increase my odds? How do I land the next mission and see the world as beheld by the gods?
It seems that I've stuffed up. I flunked my first test. Improving the spacesuits is unlikely to impress. I should have picked boosters or cockpit design. Now my chance of a mission must be in decline. But thanks to the Ruskies kicking our ass, Eva's moved up the agenda real fast. Congress wants action, no longer talk. As head of the spacesuits, I should get the first walk.
Gemini 4 will attempt the first American spacewalk, commanded by McDivitt and White as pilots.
How do I sway the decision? How do I increase my odds? How do I land the next mission and see the world as beheld by the gods?
Gemini 5 will be commanded by Pete Cooper, pilot Dick Conrad.
Get mission planning was quite a surprise. It seems I'm of value, at least in some eyes. But my row with my chairman may change things quite fast. I told him that he doesn't know his elbow from his ass. But coming up next is my specialty, space rendezvous. They're sure to pick me, but thought it was wise not to leave things to chance. So reminded Slayton of my skills in advance.
Gemini 6 will attempt the first space rendezvous, commanded by Wally Shearer, pilot Tom Stafford.
How do I sway the decision? How do I increase my odds? How do I land the next mission and see a world as beheld by the gods?
Gemini 7 will be commanded by Frank Borman, pilot Jim Lovell.
For me, it's the challenge that is interesting. How do you simulate conditions on the moon? It is one thing to replicate a flight in space, quite another to land in a vacuum. Aerodynamics are no longer applicable, for without air, how do we steer? If we're to practice landing on another world, then those conditions must be created here.
Gemini 8 will be commanded by Neil Armstrong, pilot Dave Scott.
Armstrong's the last of the old heads. Now Deke must pick from group 3. So at last I'll get a mission. Cause surely now he has to choose me.